All right, so there's a new plan making the rounds for Iran's future, one that's being put forward by supporters of Reza Pahlavi. And wow, it is already getting hit with some incredibly sharp criticism. Today, we're going to unpack the arguments from one prominent political analyst who is, well, questioning its very foundation. I mean, listen to this quote. "This resembles a comedy." Wow. That comes directly from political analyst Hassan Shariat Madari. He is clearly not mincing words here. And honestly, that line sets a pretty dramatic tone for his whole critique of this proposed framework. So the big question is, what's really behind such a strong reaction?
Okay, so let's break this down. We're looking at a plan under scrutiny, really examining the core criticisms against this proposed transitional framework.
So the first major critique that gets leveled against this thing, it's all about the plan being way too simple. I mean, is this proposal just fundamentally too simplistic for such a complex nation? The argument is that there's a huge mismatch between what the plan is and the reality it's supposed to deal with.
And this really puts it into perspective. On one side, you've got Iran, a nation of 85 million people, with incredibly deep-rooted social and political structures, a really complex place. And on the other side, a document that's described as just a few pages long. So Shariat Madari's argument is pretty straightforward. How on earth can a plan this brief even begin to address the immense challenges of a nation that complex? It just doesn't seem to add up.
And that brings us to the second major critique, the leadership question. I mean, if the plan itself is seen as too simple, the argument goes that the proposed way of actually choosing a leader, well, that's even more troubling. So how exactly would a transitional leader be picked?
This is really the heart of the matter, isn't it? It all comes down to a fundamental question of legitimacy. How do you choose a leader for 85 million people? It's a huge question, and according to the critique we're looking at, the methods being suggested are just deeply, deeply flawed.
So the critique points to two possible ways this could go down, and it dismisses both of them. First, the idea that a small, unelected group could just make the decision. Or second, that the choice would be driven by what the source calls TV propaganda. You know, basically a decision based on media hype and whoever's most popular, not on any real democratic mandate.
And to make this point really concrete, the critique specifically calls out a meeting that happened in Munich. We're talking about 500 people. The idea that this small group could decide the fate of an entire nation is presented as just fundamentally undemocratic.
And then you put that number up against this one, 85 million. That's the population of Iran. So you've got 500 people over here deciding for 85 million over there. The contrast is just staggering, right? And that's used as the core of the argument that this whole process would lack legitimacy because of this massive democratic deficit.
Okay, so the third major critique pivots from the present day all the way back to the past. It looks at the legacy of Iran's past monarchs and uses history as this really powerful cautionary tale, basically warning against repeating what it sees as old mistakes.
And to back this up, the critique points to a really stark historical pattern. I mean, look at the last four Shahs of Iran. Muhammad Ali Shah Qajar died in exile. Ahmed Shah Qajar died in exile. Reza Shah Pahlavi died in exile. And Mohammad Reza Pahlavi also died in exile. Every single one of them ended their days outside the country they ruled.
So this pattern is presented as a crystal clear lesson from history. The argument is that Iranian society has a track record, a history, of rejecting rulers who come to power with foreign help or who don't have that genuine, broad, popular support from inside the country. It's a really powerful point.
And this whole fear is captured in this incredibly powerful metaphor. Shariat Madari warns against any leader who might need foreign military intervention to get into power, someone arriving, in his exact words, on the wings of war angels. The implication is crystal clear. A leader who comes in like that would be seen as totally illegitimate and, based on history, would eventually be rejected.
And this leads to the final point of the critique, which kind of turns the lens inward. It asks, is this a movement divided? The argument here is that these criticisms aren't just coming from outside observers. No, it suggests there are significant fractures inside the pro-monarchy movement itself.
Because, according to the source, there are extensive disagreements among monarchists over these kinds of plans. That points to a really deep lack of consensus, which pretty much undermines any idea of a unified front, right?
It frames the plan not just as flawed from an outside perspective, but as a huge point of contention for people you'd think would be on the same side. And that brings us right back to that initial brutal assessment, that it's all a comedy.
So, at the end of the day, we're left with this really crucial overarching question. When you look past the details of this one specific plan, what does all this heated internal debate really reveal? It seems to point to a landscape of deeply competing visions for the future of Iran's opposition. It just goes to show how incredibly complex and how contested that path forward really is.